When I heard the heavy footsteps dragging across the concrete of that cold room, I realized my night security shift wasn't just lonely, it was dangerous. This happened at the old warehouse on Industrial Avenue back in October of 2023, and to this day, I lock my windows with 3 deadbolts because I know he still knows where I live. I've been working security in decommissioned warehouses for about 5 years. It's a solitary job, but peaceful, perfect for someone who prefers the quiet. Just me, the shadows, and a walkie-talkie that rarely crackles with anything more than static. For this particular warehouse, a concrete and steel giant forgotten on the outskirts of the city, nobody really cared. It was my private refuge after noisy days in the metropolis. I arrived promptly at 10 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday in October. The main gate, a monster of rusted metal, groaned in protest, as it always does. My routine was unchangeable, almost a ritual. Make the first full patrol around 11 p.m., inspect every corner, check the most obvious blind spots, and log the observations in my trusty logbook. Then, I'd spend the rest of the early morning in the small control room, a claustrophobic cubicle with only the cold light of the monitor and the hum of an old space heater. The warehouse was vast, a labyrinth of dark corridors and aisles where old machines, covered in tattered tarps, looked like sleeping ghosts. The only constant sound, besides my own breathing, was the wind that seemed to whisper secrets between the metal shelves. That night, everything seemed exactly the same as always. The sharp smell of mildew and rancid industrial oil, the occasional creak of metal beams under the weight of the humidity. I was following protocol, every step calculated, every glance attentive, unaware that normalcy was about to be brutally interrupted. Around 12:30 a.m., during my second full patrol, an unusual detail caught my eye. In the section dedicated to heavy equipment, one of the thick tarps covering an old forklift seemed to have been slightly disturbed, as if someone had peeked underneath it. A break in the cover. Immediately, my mind tried to rationalize. It must have been the strong wind coming through the cracks, or maybe a larger animal, a particularly bold raccoon. I noted the observation in the logbook, but a slight unease remained. A nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I decided to pick up the pace a little. At 2:15 a.m., while I was recording the readings from an obsolete humidity sensor in one of the farthest aisles, a clear, distinct sound cut through the silence. A metallic noise coming from aisle C, a slow, deliberate scraping, as if a heavy tool was being dragged across the polished concrete. I froze. My heart hammered. I grabbed my tactical flashlight, whose powerful beam could slice through the darkness, and the walkie-talkie, keeping my finger netty on the transmit button. I stood motionless, the silence of the warehouse now heavy and threatening, listening. Nothing. Just the constant, mournful sound of the wind howling outside. Rationalizing was easy again. It's the wind banging something loose. The adrenaline began to subside, but the feeling of being watched, of not being alone, intensified in a palpable way. It was an icy chill on the back of my neck. Shortly before 4 a.m., on my patrol back to the control room, I noticed that one of my favorite blind spots, a dark and forgotten corner behind a colossal stack of old wooden crates, looked different. There was a clear, fresh boot print on the dusty floor, a tread pattern I recognized, but that definitely hadn't been there on my first round. And a smell, a faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable smell of cigarette smoke hung in the air. It was around 5:17 a.m. The sky outside was beginning to lighten. The rain had eased to a fine, melancholy drizzle. I was in the control room, the silence broken only by the hum of the heater and my own heart hammering against my ribs. I was preparing to finish the final round and hand over the shift. Suddenly, the space heater sputtered and died. The room plunged into near-total darkness, with only the faint glow of the monitor and the pale dawn light filtering through the grimy windows. A shiver ran down my spine, and it wasn't just from the cold that was beginning to fill the cubicle. That's when I heard it. A low sound, a rhythmic scraping coming from aisle C, the same aisle where I'd heard the metallic dragging earlier. But this time, it was closer, much closer. And it wasn't just a scrape. It was the sound of something heavy being dragged on the concrete, but with a deliberate rhythm, almost like shuffling footsteps. My body froze. The adrenaline that had previously kept me alert now paralyzed me. My mouth was dry, my hands were clammy. I stood up slowly, trying not to make a sound, and approached the metal door of the control room. Through the small reinforced glass window, I could barely make out anything in the gloom. But then, a shape moved. Slow, dense. A dark silhouette materialized just a few feet from my door. I couldn't make out details, but it was definitely a human figure, crouched low, as if moving stealthily. The dragging sound grew louder. It was as if he was pulling something large and heavy across the floor, toward my room. My breathing became short and shallow. I picked up the walkie-talkie with a trembling hand. "Dispatch, this is Night Watch, requesting immediate backup in aisle C. I have a—" My voice failed. Suddenly, a deafening shriek of tearing metal echoed from outside the door. It wasn't dragging, it was an aggressive scraping, the sound of something sharp being forced against the door. I could see, through the small window, a pointed piece of metal piercing through the door. A piece of rebar, maybe? He was trying to get in. Terror seized me. The feeling of claustrophobia and helplessness was overwhelming. I started backing away, bumping into the cold wall. The door groaned under the pressure. The sound of tearing metal intensified, followed by a low, guttural grunt. I looked at my workbench, searching for anything I could use as a weapon. My small utility knife, the one with the orange handle that I always kept there as a precaution. I grabbed it with a trembling hand, the cold blade a minimal comfort in my sweaty palm. The metal of the door gave way an inch. The shape outside moved closer to the window. And then, a different sound, a sound that chilled me to the bone. A heavy, wet sigh, coming from right outside my door. Close, very close. The sound of the door giving way was the trigger. Without thinking, acting on pure survival instinct, I kicked the door with all the strength I had left. The old metal shrieked and twisted, opening just enough for me to squeeze through and run. I ran down the dark aisle, my footsteps echoing the sound of my own panic. I didn't look back. I ran toward the service exit, the only one that wasn't locked from the inside. The fine rain hit my face as soon as I got out, the cold, damp air hitting me like a shock. I saw the distant lights of the highway and ran toward them. A delivery truck was passing. I yelled, waved, turned on my cell phone's flashlight desperately. The driver, a gray-haired man with a tired face, stopped. He saw me, dirty, terrified, with the knife still in my hand. Without asking too many questions, he let me into the cab. On the way into the city, I told him what happened. He listened intently, nodding his head slowly. When we got to the police station, the story was met with a mix of skepticism and resignation. "Trespassing?" asked the desk sergeant, bored. "No witnesses, no concrete evidence. You sure it wasn't an animal or something you overlooked?" I showed him the pictures of the boot prints, the hole in the door. He sighed. "I'll file a report. But without anything concrete, what can we do?" He told me incidents like this were rare,
but that strange things happened in isolated industrial areas. There were never any arrests. Months later, searching online, I found a small forum. Several accounts from night watchmen in similar warehouses in neighboring towns describing strange sounds, moved objects, the feeling of being watched. One of them mentioned seeing a masked figure similar to the one I glimpsed, and later finding a note with the phrase, "You should have kept quiet." The post was deleted in less than 24 hours. The police never found anything. The warehouse is still in operation. I don't sleep peacefully anymore. Every creak, every shadow makes me look at the door. The knife with the orange handle is always on my nightstand. Since that night, my life has changed. The front door of my house now has 3 deadbolts and a peephole I check before opening. I sleep with the hallway light on, and any sudden noise makes me jump out of bed. I check the windows at least 10 times before going to sleep. Sirens in the street make me break out in a cold sweat. At work, the manager didn't fire me, but he transferred me to the day shift. That warehouse on the south side, for me, has become a dark place, a constant reminder of what can hide in the darkness. A few weeks ago, I received a package in the mail, no return address. Inside, just one object, a pointed piece of metal corroded with rust. It looked familiar, exactly like the one that pierced the control room door. Beneath it, a simple note, written in a sloppy cursive. Are you still watching? I know they know where I live. I know they know where I work. The horror isn't over. It's just waiting. And I can't sleep anymore.